I'm Tessa, 27, and the biological daughter of Elaine Montgomery, Boston's social elite queen. Last night, my mother threw an extravagant gala for my stepsister Clarissa's 25th birthday at the Fairmont Hotel. 15 years of increasing favoritism culminated in that moment when Mother clinked her crystal champagne flute and proudly announced to 300 guests that Clarissa was her only daughter. That was when I decided enough was enough. Before I share what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, what I did next at that gala will make your jaw drop. I wasn't always the family afterthought. For the first 12 years of my life, I was Tessa Montgomery, the cherished only child of Richard and Elaine Montgomery. We lived in a stately colonial in Beacon Hill where my mother hosted the kind of dinner parties that got mentioned in Boston society pages. My father ran a successful investment firm, and my mother dedicated herself to climbing the social ladder with the determination of an Olympic athlete. Our life looked perfect in the family portraits that lined our mahogany staircase. Me in coordinated dresses with pristine white tights, my hair always in perfect ringlets, flanked by my immaculately dressed parents. But even then, perfection came with a price. Mother was never the warm, nurturing type. Her affection was conditional dispensed when I performed well at school concerts or behaved impeccably at her social gatherings. Stand up straight, Tessa. Smile, but not too widely. The Montgomery name means something in this town, she would remind me before every event. I became adept at being the perfect accessory to her perfectly curated life. My father was different. Behind his professional exterior was a man who would sneak into my room after Mother went to bed to read me real stories, not the educational ones Mother selected. He taught me to play chess, encouraged my interest in art and architecture, and most importantly, he made me feel seen. "You have fire in you, Tessie," he'd say, using the nickname my mother despised for its informality. "Never let anyone dim that light." Everything changed the summer I turned 12. I came home from Camp Windermere 2 weeks early with a case of severe poison ivy, only to find our home in chaos. The staff was whispering my mother was locked in her bedroom, and my father was packing a suitcase in his study. He sat me down, his eyes red-rimmed and voice unsteady. "I've made a terrible mistake, Tessie. I've hurt your mother deeply, and I need to leave for a while." The mistake had a name. Jennifer, his 30-year-old secretary. The while turned out to be forever. The divorce was ugly, public, and humiliating for my mother, who learned that Boston's elite could be vicious when they smelled blood in the water. Former friends suddenly had conflicts when she tried to schedule lunch. Invitations dried up. The whispers followed us everywhere. Mother's pain curdled into bitterness that she wore like expensive perfume. She became obsessed with rehabilitating our social standing, and I became the collateral damage in her campaign. In her eyes, I looked too much like my father. Same green eyes, same dimpled smile, same stubborn chin. Worse, I maintained a relationship with him despite her attempts to poison it. "After what he did to us, I don't understand how you can even speak to him," she would say when I returned from weekend visits with Dad, who had moved to a downtown apartment. "He didn't leave me, Mom. He left you," I once replied, instantly regretting the words when I saw the cold fury in her eyes. "He destroyed this family. But you're too young to understand loyalty." I was 14 when William Crawford entered our lives. He was a widowed investment banker with old money and the right connections. Exactly what my mother needed to reestablish herself. He was kind in a distracted way with salt and pepper hair and a penchant for expensive scotch. But it wasn't William who would change my life forever. It was his daughter. Clarissa Crawford was my age with honey blonde hair and a shy demeanor that immediately appealed to my mother's need to nurture someone who wasn't tainted by association with my father. "Isn't she lovely?" Mother cooed after their first dinner at our home. "So well-mannered and unspoiled. Her poor mother died when she was just 8. She needs a feminine influence." I tried to welcome Clarissa. I showed her my room, offered to share my books, suggested we could be friends, maybe even sisters someday. She smiled politely but said little. In retrospect, I realized she was assessing the situation, calculating her place in this new dynamic. It didn't take long for Clarissa to realize the power she held over my mother. Every hesitant smile, every soft, "Thank you, Elaine," was rewarded with my mother's undivided attention. I watched as Clarissa transformed from a seemingly shy wallflower into a master manipulator with my mother as her willing subject. When William proposed after 6 months of dating, my mother accepted immediately. The social redemption she craved was finally within reach. What I didn't understand then was that her new beginning would mark the beginning of my erasure. The first signs of trouble appeared when we moved into William's mansion in Chestnut Hill. The estate was grand, 6 bedrooms, a swimming pool, manicured gardens. But somehow, despite the abundance of space, I ended up with the smallest bedroom tucked away at the end of the hall near the back staircase. "Clarissa needs the larger suite because of her anxiety," Mother explained when I questioned the arrangement. "The room gets better morning light, and her therapist says sunlight is important for her condition." I hadn't known Clarissa had anxiety. She seemed perfectly composed during the family dinners and weekend outings we'd shared over the previous months. But I didn't argue. At 15, I was still trying to be the perfect daughter, hoping that my compliance would win back my mother's affection. The bedroom was just the beginning. For Clarissa's 16th birthday, Mother organized a boat cruise around Boston Harbor, with catering from the city's most exclusive restaurant and gift bags containing Tiffany bracelets for each guest. 2 weeks later, on my 16th birthday, Mother had a migraine and forgot to make dinner reservations. We ended up eating takeout Chinese food, which Clarissa complained about because she was trying to avoid carbs. "We'll do something special next weekend," Mother promised, but next weekend became next month, then never. My father noticed the shift during his visits. "Your mother is going through a phase," he tried to explain after he saw me wearing the same sneakers I'd had for 2 years, while Clarissa had a closet full of designer shoes. "She's trying to impress William and bond with Clarissa. It doesn't mean she loves you any less." But it did. Every time Mother took Clarissa shopping but claimed to be too busy when I needed something. Every time she attended Clarissa's mediocre school performances but had conflicts for my art exhibition where I won first place. Every time she introduced us as my stepdaughter Clarissa and Tessa, never my daughters, or even my daughter Tessa and my stepdaughter Clarissa. The pattern became clearer as high school progressed. Clarissa was struggling academically, barely maintaining a C average while I was on the honor roll. Yet Mother hired tutors for Clarissa, praised her effusively for the slightest improvement, and barely acknowledged my achievements. "Not everyone needs to show off their intelligence, Tessa," she said when I showed her my early acceptance letter to Boston University's architecture program. "Clarissa has other qualities. She's socially gifted." Those social gifts included an ability to befriend the children of Boston's most influential families, throwing parties when parents were away, and cultivating the kind of superficial relationships that my mother valued above all else. I tried talking to her about the favoritism once during my senior year of high school. "Mom, do you realize that you haven't asked me a single question about my college applications, but you've called the admissions office at Emerson 3 times for Clarissa?" She looked at me as if I'd accused her of a crime. "That's ridiculous, Tessa. I treat you both exactly the same. Clarissa just needs more support because she doesn't have a mother. You've always been independent." "She has you," I pointed out. "You've been her stepmother for 3 years. That's different, and you know it. She lost her mother at a formative age. Besides, she struggles more than you do. You've always been fine on your own." That was the moment I realized I would never win this argument. In my mother's revisionist history, I had always been self-sufficient, never needing her attention or affection, while Clarissa was the vulnerable one requiring constant support. The truth was that I had become self-sufficient out of necessity. I had learned to help myself with homework because Mother was busy helping Clarissa. I had learned to shop for my own clothes using the credit card my father provided because Mother was too occupied with Clarissa's wardrobe. I had learned to celebrate my own achievements because Mother was focused on praising Clarissa's minimal efforts. William saw what was happening. Occasionally, he would try to intervene in his gentle, conflict-averse way. "Elaine, did you see Tessa's art was selected for the youth exhibit at the MFA?" he would mention at dinner. "Yes, that's nice," Mother would reply dismissively before turning to Clarissa. "Darling, tell us more about the fundraiser you're helping to organize." William would catch my eye and offer an apologetic smile, but he never pushed harder. Peace in his household was worth more to him than justice. College became my escape. At Boston University, I found a community that valued me for my talents and personality. I made real friends who didn't care about social standing or family connections. I discovered my passion for interior design, combining my artistic abilities with my love of architecture. My father remained my constant supporter both emotionally and financially. He attended every exhibition, took me to dinner weekly, and made sure I had everything I needed for school. While Mother was grooming Clarissa to be the next Boston socialite, Dad was helping me build the foundation for a career I loved. "I'm proud of you, Tessie," he would say. "You're building something real, something that will last." By graduation, I had secured an internship at a prestigious design firm and was making plans to eventually start my own business. Mother attended the ceremony, of course. Appearances were important. But she spent most of the time talking about Clarissa's summer plans in Europe, rather than my accomplishments. It hurt, but by then I had developed a protective emotional shell. I no longer expected her approval or attention. I had accepted that in the story she had created, Clarissa was the daughter she had always wanted, and I was an obligation to be managed. What I didn't realize was that the worst was yet to come. At 27, I had built a life I was proud of. My interior design business, Montgomery Design, had grown from a one-woman operation to a small firm with 3 employees and a portfolio of impressive clients. I had my own apartment in the South End, a neighborhood my mother considered transitional, but that I loved for its creative energy and diversity. I maintained contact with my family despite the ongoing favoritism. Sunday dinners at the Chestnut Hill Mansion were a monthly obligation I fulfilled more out of habit than desire. My relationship with William had evolved into something resembling friendship. He admired my business acumen and occasionally referred clients to me. Clarissa and I existed in a state of polite detachment, exchanging pleasantries but never developing the sisterly bond my mother had once envisioned. Mother herself remained a complicated presence in my life, a source of both lingering hurt and reluctant attachment. Part of me still yearned for her approval, even as the rational part knew it would never come. Dr. Levine, my therapist of 3 years, called this my core wound, the childhood belief that if I just tried harder, achieved more, or became perfect enough, my mother would finally see and love me. "Your mother's inability to connect with you isn't about you, Tessa," Dr. Levine would remind me during our sessions. "It's about her own unresolved issues and limitations." Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, the abandoned 12-year-old inside me still wondered what was wrong with me that my own mother couldn't love me properly. While I was building my business, Clarissa was on a different trajectory. She had dropped out of Emerson College after 2 years, declaring it too structured for her creative spirit. Through Mother's connections, she landed a position at Style Boston, a glossy magazine run by family friend Victoria Harrington. Her title was Creative Consultant, though from what I could gather, her primary responsibilities involved attending events and posting about them on social media. Mother found endless excuses for Clarissa's lack of direction. "She's networking," or "she's finding herself," or my personal favorite, "Not everyone needs to be conventionally successful like you, Tessa." The dynamics at our family dinners highlighted the ongoing disparity in how we were treated. A typical Sunday evening in the formal dining room would unfold like this. "Clarissa, darling, tell everyone about the charity gala you attended." Mother would prompt, beaming with pride. Clarissa would launch into a detailed account of the designer dresses, celebrity sightings, and social connections she'd made, while Mother hung on every word. "Tessa, how is your little business going?" Mother would eventually ask, almost as an afterthought. If I mentioned signing a major client or being featured in Boston Home magazine, she would nod politely before turning back to Clarissa. "Now, about your upcoming trip to New York Fashion Week." William would occasionally try to balance the scales. "Elaine, did you know Tessa just completed the redesign for the Hendersons' summer home in Nantucket? They're very well connected in the art world." Mother would acknowledge this with minimal interest before redirecting the conversation to Clarissa's world. What neither of them knew was that my little business was actually keeping the family financially afloat. William had made some poor investments in recent years, and while they maintained the appearance of wealth, their finances were increasingly precarious. I discovered this accidentally when William asked me to help redesign his home office, and I found past due notices buried in his desk while measuring the space. 2 months later, he approached me privately with a business proposition. Would I be interested in taking on the Crawford Foundation's new community center as a client? The budget he mentioned was substantial enough to cover my team's work for 6 months. I later learned he had diverted funds from other foundation projects to make this happen, essentially creating a way to transfer money to me without damaging his pride. I accepted the project, understanding the unspoken arrangement. I never mentioned it to Mother or Clarissa, and William's relief was palpable. It became our secret. The black sheep daughter financially supporting the family, while the golden child continued spending as if nothing had changed. My support extended beyond the business arrangement. When Clarissa maxed out Mother's credit card on a spontaneous trip to Bali with friends, I quietly transferred funds to cover the bill. When Mother mentioned needing a refresher with her plastic surgeon, but lamented the cost, I gave her a check for her birthday that coincidentally matched the exact amount. They accepted these gifts without questioning where the money came from, perhaps assuming my father was subsidizing me. The irony wasn't lost on me. While being treated as an afterthought in my own family, I was becoming indispensable to their lifestyle. My therapist called this a caretaking pattern and warned me about enabling their behavior. But some part of me hoped that if I proved myself valuable enough, Mother might finally see me. My friends didn't understand why I maintained the relationship. "Your mother is toxic, Tessa," my best friend Zoe would say after listening to my latest family dinner story. "You don't have to keep showing up to be rejected. Family is complicated." I would respond, the explanation sounding weak even to my own ears. Michael, the architectural photographer I had been dating for 8 months, was more direct. "You're successful, intelligent, and kind. You don't need her approval anymore. At some point, you have to decide that you deserve better." He was right, of course. But breaking free of the pattern required a catalyst, something that would finally make the status quo unbearable. That catalyst arrived in the form of an embossed invitation to a celebration of Clarissa Crawford's 25th year, to be held at the Fairmont Hotel's Grand Ballroom. The announcement of Clarissa's 25th birthday gala came during a Sunday dinner in early spring. Mother was practically glowing as she described her vision for the event: a night in Paris theme with imported French champagne and orchestra ice sculptures, and a guest list of 300 Boston elite. "It will be the social event of the season," she declared, reaching over to squeeze Clarissa's hand. My beautiful girl deserves nothing less. I focused on cutting my roast beef into perfectly even pieces, saying nothing. Clarissa's 21st birthday had warranted a weekend in New York with Broadway shows and shopping. My 25th, just 2 years earlier, had been acknowledged with a gift card to Pottery Barn and a text message. "Tessa, I'm hoping you'll help with some of the aesthetic elements," Mother continued. "The invitations, perhaps the table settings. You have a good eye for that sort of thing." Translation: free design work. "I'd be happy to help," I replied, automatically, the people-pleaser in me responding before my self-respect could object. Over the next 2 months, I found myself dragged into endless planning sessions. I created beautiful custom invitations featuring a watercolor of the Paris skyline, only to have Mother reject them in favor of Clarissa's preference for something more modern and Instagram-worthy. I developed a sophisticated color palette of midnight blue and silver, which was promptly overruled for Clarissa's choice of Parisian pink and gold. Every suggestion I made was dismissed or modified beyond recognition. Yet Mother continued to request my presence at planning meetings, florist appointments, and menu tastings, not because she valued my input, but because she needed an audience for her grand production. The breaking point came 3 weeks before the gala. I had stopped by the mansion to drop off some fabric samples Mother had requested, expecting to leave them with the housekeeper. Instead, I overheard voices coming from the sunroom, Mother and Clarissa not realizing I had arrived. "This gala is everything I've dreamed of giving my daughter," Mother was saying, her voice warm with affection. "It's perfect, Elaine," Clarissa replied. "I can't believe how lucky I am to have you as my mother." "Darling, I'm the lucky one. You're the daughter I always wanted. Beautiful, socially adept, the perfect reflection of me. Sometimes I think fate brought us together to give me a second chance at motherhood. I stood frozen in the hallway, the fabric samples clutched to my chest as Mother continued. With Tessa, I always felt like I was forcing a square peg into a round hole. She's so much like her father, too serious, too focused on achievement rather than connection. But you and I, we understand each other. You're the daughter of my heart. The housekeeper's appearance at the end of the hall forced me to move. I quickly left the samples on the entry table and fled to my car, where I finally allowed the tears to come. It wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the genuine warmth in my mother's voice, a tone I couldn't remember her ever using with me. I called my father that evening, something I rarely did in moments of emotional crisis. I had always tried to shield him from the reality of my relationship with Mother, not wanting to burden him with guilt over the divorce that had set these events in motion. I don't know why I'm still trying, I said after recounting what I'd overheard. Nothing I do will ever be enough for her. There was a long pause before he responded. Tessie, there's something I've never told you about your mother's childhood. Something that might help you understand, though it doesn't excuse her behavior. He explained that my maternal grandmother had similarly favored my mother's brother, creating a pattern of maternal rejection that had scarred my mother deeply. She's repeating what was done to her, probably without even realizing it. That doesn't make it right, but it might explain why she's latched onto Clarissa. She represents a do-over, a chance to create the mother-daughter relationship she never had with her own mother. So I'm just collateral damage in her healing process? I asked bitterly. No, sweetheart. You're a casualty of her unhealed wounds. There's a difference. His voice softened. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? It was a good question. I could confront Mother, but past attempts at discussing her favoritism had only resulted in denial and gaslighting. I could cut ties completely, but despite everything, some part of me still yearned for resolution rather than rupture. I think I need to attend this gala, I finally said. Not for her, but for me. I need to see this situation clearly with open eyes before I decide what comes next. Whatever you choose, I'm here, my father promised. And Tessie, your worth isn't determined by her ability to see it. Remember that. As the gala approached, I found myself oddly calm. I selected a dress, a midnight blue gown that made my eyes look like emeralds, and asked Michael to accompany me. I wasn't going to give Mother the satisfaction of seeing me attend alone. Are you sure you want to do this? Michael asked as he adjusted his bow tie on the evening of the event. We could still bail, fly to Mexico, drink margaritas on the beach instead. The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. I need to see this through, but keep the Mexico option open for afterward. He kissed me softly. I'm proud of you, you know. You're handling this with more grace than most people would. I didn't feel graceful. I felt like I was walking into battle armed only with my dignity and the uncomfortable truths I had finally begun to accept about my family. But sometimes that's all you need. The Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a Parisian fantasy. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables adorned with towering arrangements of pale pink roses and peonies. A champagne fountain bubbled in the center of the room, surrounded by towers of macarons in pastel colors. At the entrance, a scale model of the Eiffel Tower stood 15 feet tall, wrapped in twinkling lights. Subtle, Michael murmured as we handed our invitation to the tuxedoed attendant at the door. Mother doesn't do subtle, I replied, tightening my grip on his arm as we entered. The room was already half full, Boston's elite mingling in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. I recognized judges, politicians, CEOs, old money families whose ancestors had arrived on the Mayflower, and new money tech entrepreneurs eager to break into this rarefied social circle. Everyone who was anyone had accepted Mother's invitation, a testament to her successful social rehabilitation since the divorce scandal. Several family friends approached us immediately, greeting me with the particular blend of warmth and pity that had become familiar over the years. Tessa, darling, you look stunning, cooed Victoria Harrington, Clarissa's boss at Style Boston. That color is perfect on you. And who is this handsome escort? I introduced Michael, accepting compliments and making small talk with the ease of someone raised in this world. Whatever else Mother had failed to give me, she had ensured I knew how to navigate a ballroom full of Boston's power players. Mother and Clarissa were holding court near the champagne fountain, both dressed in variations of pale pink that made them look like mother-daughter versions of the same person. Mother's gown was understated elegance, a sheath of blush silk with subtle beading that caught the light. Clarissa's was more dramatic, a full-skirted ball gown with a sweetheart neckline and crystal embellishments that ensured all eyes were drawn to her. William spotted us first, breaking away from his wife and stepdaughter to greet us with evident relief. Since our private financial arrangement, he had become increasingly uncomfortable in family gatherings, caught between his loyalty to his wife and his growing awareness of the unfairness of the situation. "Tessa, Michael, thank you for coming," he said, kissing my cheek and shaking Michael's hand. "You both look wonderful." "The event is spectacular," I said, gesturing to the elaborate decorations. "Mother outdid herself." "Yes, well, you know Elaine. Nothing but the best for her princess." He grimaced slightly, realizing what he'd said. "I mean, she wanted to make it special for Clarissa's milestone birthday." "Of course," I replied smoothly. "It's certainly special." Mother finally noticed our arrival, her expression shifting from radiant hostess to something more controlled as she approached Clarissa, trailing behind her like a pink shadow. "Tessa, you made it," she said, air-kissing my cheek without making contact. "And Michael, how nice of you to accompany her." She didn't wait for a response before turning to Clarissa. "Darling, you remember Tessa's boyfriend, he's the photographer." "Of course." Clarissa smiled without warmth. "The one who takes pictures of buildings." "Architectural photography," Michael corrected pleasantly. "Happy birthday, Clarissa. The party is quite impressive." "Isn't it divine?" Clarissa preened. "Mother has been planning it for months. Everything has to be perfect for tonight." "I'm sure it will be," I said. "The decorations are beautiful." "Yes, well, we made some adjustments to your original concepts," Mother replied dismissively. "They needed a more youthful touch." Before I could respond, she was already looking past me, waving to another arriving guest. "Senator Williams, so glad you could make it. Clarissa, come say hello. You remember the senator's son from the charity regatta last summer?" And just like that, they were gone, leaving William looking apologetic once again. "I should—" He gestured vaguely in their direction. "Go," I assured him. "We're fine." Michael squeezed my hand as William hurried after his wife and stepdaughter. "Drink," he suggested. "Make it a double," I replied. The next hour passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. We were seated at table 19, far from the head table, where Mother, William, Clarissa, and their most important guests were positioned. Our table mates included distant family friends and business associates, people important enough to invite but not significant enough to warrant prime placement. Dinner was served, filet mignon with truffle butter for most tables, though I noticed the head table received some special preparations served under silver domes. The irony of being excluded even in menu options at an event I had helped plan wasn't lost on me. As dessert was being cleared, Mother stood and tapped her crystal champagne flute with a silver spoon. The room gradually fell silent as all attention turned to her. "Friends, family, distinguished guests," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate a very special young woman on her 25th birthday." She turned to smile at Clarissa, who beamed back at her with practiced radiance. 25 years ago, the world was blessed with this beautiful spirit. Mother continued rewriting history with breathtaking confidence. From the moment she came into my life, I knew she was extraordinary. I felt Michael tense beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. Many of you have watched Clarissa grow from a shy young girl into the poised, accomplished woman she is today. Her kindness, her social grace, her natural ability to connect with people, these qualities make a mother's heart swell with pride. Mother paused, her eyes glistening with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "Tonight, as we celebrate this milestone, I want to publicly express what many of you already know. Clarissa is not just my stepdaughter. She is the daughter of my heart, my true family." The knife twisted deeper, but I maintained my composure, my face a careful mask of polite attention. In Clarissa, I found what every mother hopes for: a daughter who understands me, who shares my values, who brings meaning to my life. I am blessed to stand here tonight and celebrate my only daughter, the light of my life. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Around me, I could feel people's discomfort, sense them glancing in my direction to gauge my reaction. At the neighboring tables, whispers began as people registered what Mother had just declared in front of 300 witnesses, including her biological daughter. Clarissa was practically glowing under the spotlight of Mother's public adoration, either oblivious to or unconcerned with the implications of what had just been said. William looked pained, staring into his whiskey glass as if it might offer an escape from this uncomfortable moment. I felt strangely calm, almost detached, as if watching the scene from a distance. Years of therapy had prepared me for this moment, though I'd never expected it to be quite so public or explicit. This was the culmination of a pattern that had been building for 15 years. Mother finally saying out loud what her actions had long implied. Michael's hand tightened around mine. "You don't deserve this," he whispered. "No one does." As Mother continued her speech detailing Clarissa's manufactured accomplishments and future prospects, a clarity settled over me. The 12-year-old girl who still craved her mother's approval finally fell silent inside me. In her place stood this woman I had become: successful, loved, resilient. Mother finished her speech to polite applause, then raised her glass. "To Clarissa, my only daughter on her 25th birthday, may your life continue to be as extraordinary as you are." The guests dutifully echoed, "To Clarissa," and sipped their champagne. In that moment, I made a decision. I had spent years accepting crumbs of affection, years financing this family's lifestyle, while being treated as an outsider, years hoping for a recognition that would never come. It was time to break the pattern. I stood up, my own champagne glass in hand, and gently tapped it with a spoon. Heads turned in my direction, curiosity and anticipation rippling through the ballroom. "I'd like to make a toast as well," I said, my voice steady and clear. Mother's expression froze somewhere between surprise and alarm. Clarissa looked annoyed at having the spotlight diverted, while William appeared to be bracing himself for whatever might come next. I smiled, looking directly at my mother as I raised my glass. "First, I'd like to congratulate Clarissa on reaching this milestone. 25 is a significant age, one often associated with achieving independence and self-sufficiency." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, though many looked confused about where this was going. "Mother, before we continue the celebration, could you remind everyone who paid for your facelift last year when Clarissa spent your spa fund on that trip to Bali?" The gasp that went through the room was audible. Mother's face drained of color, her perfect composure cracking for the first time that evening. "Or perhaps you could explain to Senator Williams why the Crawford Foundation's Community Center project is being managed by Montgomery Design at a significant discount to offset Williams' investment losses." William choked on his whiskey while several board members of the Crawford Foundation exchanged alarmed glances. "Tessa," Mother hissed, but I continued, my voice still calm and measured. It seems strange to be introduced as an afterthought at an event I helped design in a home I've been quietly subsidizing by a mother who just publicly denied my existence. The room had fallen completely silent now, 300 of Boston's elite frozen in collective shock. For 15 years, I've accepted being the family ghost, present but unseen, contributing but uncredited, loving but unloved. Tonight, I'm choosing to be visible. I turned to address the room at large, taking in the wide eyes and dropped jaws with a strange sense of satisfaction. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate Clarissa tonight. She is indeed fortunate to have such a devoted mother, even if that devotion comes at the expense of her other child." I raised my glass higher. "To Clarissa on her 25th birthday. May you someday find your worth in something more substantial than Mother's approval. Trust me when I say it's a moving target not worth chasing." With that, I drained my champagne, set the glass down with a definitive clink, and turned to Michael. "I think I'm ready for those Mexican margaritas now." He grinned, standing to offer me his arm. "Your chariot awaits, my lady." As we walked toward the exit, heads turning to follow our progress, I felt lighter than I had in years. Mother was calling my name, her voice having lost its usual authoritative tone, but I didn't look back. Some conversations were best had sober in private after years of public pretense. The night air felt cleansing as we stepped outside the sounds of chaos erupting behind us as the implications of my revelations sank in. My phone was already buzzing with texts and calls, but I silenced it and slipped it back into my clutch. "Are you okay?" Michael asked as the valet brought his car around. I considered the question carefully. "No," I finally said, "but I think I will be." As we drove away from the Fairmont, leaving behind the elaborate celebration of a relationship built on mutual delusion, I felt something unexpected. Not regret or vindication, but a profound sense of freedom. The cage I'd lived in for 15 years had always been unlocked. I had just finally chosen to open the door and walk out. The aftermath of what became known in certain Boston circles as the Gala incident was both immediate and far-reaching. My phone exploded with notifications, texts from friends who had heard about my speech calls from family members ranging from concerned to furious, even emails from guests who had witnessed the confrontation firsthand. I spent the night at Michael's apartment, my phone switched off, allowing myself the luxury of emotional decompression. We didn't fly to Mexico. Real life rarely accommodates such dramatic exits, but we did order takeout, open a bottle of wine, and talk until the early hours of the morning. "I don't regret what I said," I told him as we sat on his balcony watching the city lights. "But I regret that it had to be so public." "Some truths need witnesses," he replied. "Otherwise, they're too easy to deny later." When I finally turned my phone back on the next morning, I was surprised to find a text from William. "Can we talk alone? My office downtown 2 p.m. I agreed, curious about what he wanted to say. Michael offered to drive me, waiting in a nearby coffee shop in case I needed support afterward. William's financial firm occupied 3 floors of a sleek building in the financial district. His corner office offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, the trappings of success carefully arranged to impress clients. Awards on the walls, expensive art, family photos featuring a smiling Elaine and Clarissa. I noticed with a pang that there were no pictures of me. He rose when his assistant showed me in, looking like he hadn't slept much. "Tessa, thank you for coming." "You said you wanted to talk," I replied, taking a seat across from his massive desk. William sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "What you did last night was uncomfortable. That's one word for it. But," he continued, surprising me, "it was also long overdue." I hadn't expected that. William had always been the peacekeeper, the one who looked the other way when Mother's behavior crossed lines. "I've been a coward," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I saw how Elaine treated you. I knew it was wrong, but it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to confront the dysfunction in our family." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because last night forced me to see what my silence has enabled, and because I owe you an apology, Tessa. I should have been a better stepfather to you. I should have protected you from Elaine's issues." His candor was disarming. For the first time, I was seeing William as a flawed human being rather than just an extension of Mother's agenda. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But an apology doesn't change what happened." "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "Nothing can undo the years of hurt. But maybe we can build something different going forward." He hesitated. "That is, if you're willing to maintain a relationship with any of us after this?" It was a fair question. In the clarity of morning, I had been asking myself the same thing. Was there anything worth salvaging from the wreckage of last night's revelations? "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "That depends on a lot of things, including whether Mother is capable of acknowledging what she's done." William grimaced. "She's processing. It's not easy for someone like Elaine to face this kind of truth. Her entire identity is built around her self-image as the perfect mother, the perfect socialite. You challenged that narrative very publicly." "She created that narrative at my expense," I pointed out. "For years I've been erased from her story so she could pretend Clarissa was her do-over child." "I know," he said simply. "And she needs to acknowledge that before any healing can happen." We talked for another hour, William sharing insights into Mother's behavior that he had previously kept to himself, her obsession with social standing, her anxiety about aging, her complicated relationship with her own mother. None of it excused what she had done, but it helped me understand the broken woman behind the perfect facade. As our conversation wound down, William addressed the financial revelations I had made at the gala. About the Crawford Foundation project and the other financial matters you mentioned. I shouldn't have exposed that publicly, I admitted. That was crossing a line. Perhaps, he acknowledged. But it was true. You have been supporting this family financially, and neither Elaine nor Clarissa has acknowledged that fact. I've been embarrassed about our arrangement, but also grateful for your discretion. He opened a drawer and removed a folder. This is a proper contract for the community center project with fair market rates for your services. The foundation can afford it despite what I implied earlier. I was taking advantage of your good nature, and that stops now. I accepted the folder, touched by this small act of fairness after years of imbalance. As I prepared to leave, William asked, "Will you talk to her?" To Elaine? Not today, but when you're ready. I considered the question carefully. Yes, I finally said. Not for her sake, but for mine. I need to say certain things to her face, not just in the heat of a public confrontation. She'll listen now, he promised. Last night changed things. She can't go back to pretending anymore. I wasn't so sure about that. Mother was skilled at rewriting reality to suit her preferences, but I nodded anyway. We'll see. As I left William's office, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Victoria Harrington at Style Boston, an invitation to be featured in their Women Entrepreneurs issue. The timing was suspicious, coming the morning after I had publicly called out Victoria's pet employee and her mother. Another message arrived as I was reading the first. This one from a family friend who had attended the gala, an interior designer whose work I had always admired. Impressed with your backbone last night. If you're ever interested in a partnership, let's talk. By the time I reached the coffee shop where Michael was waiting, I had received 3 more messages from people who had witnessed my confrontation with Mother, not condemning me as I might have expected, but expressing support, offering connections, extending invitations. It seemed that Boston society had grown tired of Mother's carefully curated illusions. My willingness to shatter them had earned me a strange new respect in circles that had previously viewed me with polite indifference. Good meeting, Michael asked as I slid into the chair across from him. Surprisingly, I replied, showing him the messages. Apparently standing up to Elaine Montgomery is good for business. He laughed. That's Boston for you. They love nothing more than watching the mighty fall, except maybe profiting from it afterward. We were discussing the irony of this development when my phone rang with a call from an unexpected source. Clarissa. Should I answer it? I asked, staring at her name on the screen. Your call, Michael said. But I'm curious what she has to say after last night. So was I. I accepted the call, keeping my voice neutral. Hello, Clarissa. Tessa. She sounded subdued, none of her usual affected confidence in her tone. Can we meet to talk? About what? About last night? About everything. She paused. Please, just us, no Mother involved. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a small cafe in Back Bay, a place neither of us frequented regularly. Michael dropped me off with a promise to be on standby if needed. Clarissa was already there when I arrived, looking different from the princess who had held court at the gala. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a sweater, her face bare of makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and strangely more authentic than I had seen her in years. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. I'm listening. I replied, not unkindly, but making it clear I wasn't there for small talk. Clarissa stared into her coffee cup, gathering her thoughts. What you said last night, about Mother's facelift and William's financial problems, was it true? Not what I had expected her to lead with. Yes. And you've been helping them financially? Yes, I confirmed. For about 2 years now. She looked genuinely shocked. I had no idea. Mother always said your business was struggling, that you were barely getting by. Of course she had. Mother says a lot of things that aren't true. Clarissa flinched but didn't argue. I know, she admitted softly. I've always known on some level. She looked up at me, her expression uncharacteristically open. I owe you an apology, Tessa. I've been terrible to you for years. I've enjoyed being Mother's favorite, encouraged it even without thinking about what that meant for you. Why? I asked the question that had lingered for 15 years, finally finding voice. Why did you need to push me out? There was room for both of us in the family. Not in Mother's world, Clarissa replied. Not the way she operates. From the beginning, she set us up as competitors, for her attention, her approval, her love. And I didn't have anyone else. You had your father. Dad was always working, always distracted. He loved me, but from a distance. She twisted a napkin between her fingers. When your mother started paying attention to me, really focusing on me like I was the center of her universe, it was intoxicating. I'd never had that before. So you played along with her fantasy that you were her real daughter. Yes, she admitted. At first it was just nice to be wanted so intensely. Then it became a role I was playing, the perfect daughter she could shape in her image. Eventually I couldn't tell where the act ended and the real me began. There was something heartbreaking about her confession. Clarissa had been as much a victim of Mother's dysfunction as I had been, just in a different way. While I had been neglected, she had been molded into an extension of Mother's ego, praised for conforming and punished for any sign of independence. After a while, I started to believe I deserved it, she continued. The attention, the gifts, the opportunities. I convinced myself that I was special, that I had earned Mother's preference through some innate superiority. And now, she smiled ruefully, now I realize I was just easier to control. You've always had your own identity, your own strength. I've been whatever Mother wanted me to be, and without that, I'm not sure who I am. It wasn't the conversation I had expected to have with Clarissa, this glimpse behind the perfect stepdaughter facade to the insecure young woman beneath. For the first time in our complicated relationship, I felt something like compassion for her. What happens now? I asked. With you and Mother? Clarissa shrugged, looking lost. I don't know. After you left last night, everything fell apart. Mother had some kind of breakdown, screaming at anyone who tried to talk to her. Dad took her home, but this morning she locked herself in her room and won't come out. And you, what do you want? She considered the question as if no one had ever asked her that before. I think I need to find out who I am without Mother defining me. Maybe get a real job, one I actually have to work at. Live in my own place instead of the mansion. Independence suits you, I observed, nodding toward her casual attire and makeup-free face. You look more like yourself today than I've seen in years. Feels strange, she admitted. But good strange. She hesitated. Tessa, do you think we could start over, not as best friends or anything, but maybe as, I don't know, actual sisters without Mother's manipulation between us? It was a complicated question. Part of me wanted to write Clarissa off completely, to cut ties with everyone associated with years of emotional neglect, but another part recognized the possibility of something new emerging from the ruins of last night's confrontation. I don't know, I answered honestly. There's a lot of water under that bridge, but I'm willing to try a different kind of relationship, one based on honesty instead of competition. She nodded, looking relieved. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Clarissa surprised me with a brief, awkward hug. I really am sorry, she whispered. For everything. I know, I replied. And strangely, I did. 1 week after the gala, Mother finally reached out. Not with a call or a request to meet, but in the form of a carefully crafted Instagram post. A throwback photo of her holding me as a baby with the caption, reflecting on life's complexities and the mistakes we make as parents. Healing begins with acknowledgement. I have 2 daughters, both remarkable in different ways. One has shown me the meaning of resilience by thriving despite my failures. Beginning to Heal/Family Truth. It was performative and designed for public consumption rather than genuine reconciliation. But from Mother, it was also unprecedented. She had never before acknowledged any failure, any mistake, any flaw in her parenting. The post was followed by a handwritten note delivered to my apartment. "When you're ready to talk, I'll be listening, Mother." I wasn't ready yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the patterns too ingrained to trust that real change was possible. But for the first time, I could see a path toward an honest relationship. Not the fantasy of maternal love I had chased for so long, but something realistic with boundaries and expectations rooted in who we actually were, rather than who we pretended to be. 6 months after the gala incident, our family gathered for a small dinner at a neutral restaurant. Mother, William, Clarissa, my father invited at my insistence, Michael and me. The conversation was sometimes awkward, occasionally tense, but fundamentally different from our previous interactions. Mother was trying in her imperfect way. She asked about my business with genuine interest. She acknowledged my relationship with Michael as significant. She made an effort to divide her attention equally between Clarissa and me. Clarissa had changed too. She had moved into her own apartment, taken a legitimate entry-level position at a different magazine, and begun the process of discovering her own identity separate from Mother's influence. Our relationship was evolving slowly into something resembling actual sisterhood. Not the Hallmark movie version, but a real connection based on shared history and growing mutual respect. As for me, I had finally stopped seeking Mother's approval as the measure of my worth. The little girl who had desperately wanted to be seen and loved by her mother would always be a part of me, but she no longer drove my decisions or defined my self-image. To family. My father proposed a toast near the end of the meal. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. As we clinked glasses, Mother caught my eye across the table. "Both my daughters," she said quietly, including both Clarissa and me in her gaze. It wasn't effusive, it wasn't dramatic, but it was something she had never done before, acknowledged us equally without favoritism or erasure. It was a small step on a long road, but it was a beginning. Some patterns are generations in the making, and they aren't broken in a single night, even one as dramatic as the gala. But they can be recognized, challenged, and gradually rewoven into something healthier. As we left the restaurant that night, I realized that the greatest gift of that painful public confrontation wasn't revenge or vindication. It was the freedom to finally create my own definition of family, one based on respect rather than performance on boundaries, rather than blind loyalty on honesty, rather than comfortable lies. That's the thing about families. We don't get to choose the one we're born into, but we do get to choose what we carry forward and what we leave behind. I chose to leave behind the patterns of favoritism and emotional neglect that had defined my childhood. I chose to create something different for my future, something healthier and more authentic. And in doing so, I finally answered the question I had asked my mother in front of 300 witnesses. Yes, I am family. Not because she claimed me, but because I claimed myself. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who couldn't see your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be seen and valued. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, healing begins when we stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the whole loaf we deserve.